Gonna go ahead and get started. So here's our agenda for this evening. We're going to go over the profession, give you an overview, and then we'll go into a program overview. After that, we will hit on our program history of Washington, D.C. We'll give you an overview of our curriculum. We actually have a student with us tonight, so we will give you some insight into student experience. We'll cover the application process, and at the end, if we have time, we will open it up for Q&A. And if you do have questions during our webinar, please use the Q&A feature. It's in the middle of your toolbar. We'll be able to answer questions as we go along, or we'll save it to the end for the Q&A. All right, here are our panelists for tonight. I'll let each of them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. I'll start with Shane.
Thank you so much, Logan. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Shane Angus. I'm the Executive Program Director for the MSA Program Network, and I'm actually based here in Washington, D.C. I'm originally from California, and over the years, I've noticed that many folks have stumbled across the profession just like I did back in the 90s, and we continue to do that. I assume that many of you on here as well found out about the profession by a circuitous measure, and most of us in the field have as well. With that, I'll pass it off to Daniel.
Thanks, Shane. Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Pistoni. I'm the Interim Program Director at the Washington, D.C. location. I'm on staff here at one of our primary clinical sites at MedStar Washington Hospital Center as a CAA. And I have worn many hats here at the program, serving as simulation instructor to didactic instructor, as a classroom instructor, and now and clinical director, and now interim program director. I was a classroom teacher before going into the CAA program, so I definitely have knowledge going in a non-traditional pathway to get to this program, but happy to be in this field and serving in both the education area as well as the clinical area. Welcome and thanks for joining. Pass it along to Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Sarah Patel. I am one of the co-directors of didactic education here at Case DC. I'm originally from New York State. I was a biochemistry major in undergrad, and I also, like Shane, stumbled upon this profession, which I think is one of the best kept secrets. I serve as the didactic director since 2020. I've also served as a clinical instructor and lab instructor for the past 10 years for the DC program. I am a practicing AA for the past 20 years, and I currently work at one of the ambulatory surgery centers in Washington, DC. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nebi Todros. I am a first-year student at Case DC, and I went to undergrad at the University of Kansas, where I studied behavioral neuroscience.
Right, thank you all. We'll turn over to Shane.
All right, well, good. It's always fun hearing everybody's stories, how they come into this field. It's a very interesting pathway everybody takes. More and more these days, though, people are becoming aware of it. I know people in middle school and high school and college and postgrad now that are working towards entering the profession and entering, fulfilling all the prerequisites and whatnot. And I think what's happened across the sphere in healthcare is that the advanced practice professional is continuing to grow as a really highly needed addition to meeting the healthcare needs in the U.S. and frankly, globally. And so that's what we are. We are, as CAAs, we are members of that cadre, the advanced practice professional cadre, sometimes referred to as advanced practice professional, mid-level, extender, you name the title. We do the work regardless what the patients need. We work in our role specifically in a care team model with a physician anesthesiologist, and we work throughout the entire continuum of providing anesthesia care. So it be along with the creation and implementation of an anesthesia care plan, all the way through to wrapping up the surgery and the procedure and moving on into the recovery room and off from there. We really focus on all stages of the surgery, every possible step you can imagine, and every specialty within surgery. I think that's one of the unique aspects of our field, is that we are able to be a part of every different type of surgical specialty, whether it be neuro or cardiac or pediatric or trauma or ambulatory. We are all part of that in all age groups as well. So we're able to have a broad care model, as well as if people have an interest, you could actually focus on some of those specialty areas. In addition to that, we importantly are certified by the National Commission for Certification of Anesthesiologist Assistants, referred to as NCCAA within our sphere. And that's a national board exam that takes place towards the end of graduation. And people have to renew that certification every cycle of a 6 to 10 year cycle to demonstrate they have the basic fundamental knowledge. Our students take that towards the end, as I said, and have a trend of doing quite well. Next slide, please, Logan. There we go. So where are we practicing? Well, when Cyril and I started practicing, we had a few less stars, but we're very excited to see the number of stars we have right now. When we started, we had 2 schools and predominantly working in about 2 states for the most part. Now we're up to 22 jurisdictions and spreading. We're based in Washington, D.C., which of course is a hub of so much. But if you look at our applicants and you look at our entering classes and our graduates, they come from across the country. We diligently recruit and accept students from all over the country. And I think that's one thing that's unique about DC is it does have that national focus. With our region, of course, there's growing interest and need, but most of the needs people have seen historically have been in the South, the Midwest, and the West itself has been broadening the most. We're real proud of the expansion out West. We've been working incredibly diligently on the state of Washington. As I said, I'm originally from California, so having a West Coast is fantastic for patients to have access. And so in addition, we've been, of course, heavily involved with Nevada and Colorado and Utah opening the past sequential years. So we're expecting to see more and more as time goes by and the needs continue. Next slide, please. So we are located throughout many locations, predominantly 4 of them, and that's Cleveland, Houston, Washington, D.C., and Austin. All of our programs have a 24-month, very focused curriculum. Our curriculum starts in the summer semester, and in that summer semester, our students are with patients in the operating sphere within the first couple of weeks. And by the 4th week, they're assigned clinical responsibilities with patients and clinical instructors. So it's a really important part. It's kind of a cornerstone of our curriculum, having that early clinical exposure. We firmly believe that that enhances the classroom and simulation components. And with that, people are able to really just apply all the knowledge that they're acquiring in different sections that they're taking for their classes. We are accredited by CAA, the Commission on Accreditation of Health Education Professions or Programs, pardon me. That's a pretty rigorous, demonstration that we have to do. We just did our last one last year and received a 10-year, which is a maximum. So we feel our students and our program and our faculty and our administrative team and our clinical partners, according to them, we're all meeting those expectations and reaching those criteria. So we're real proud of our team. And we'll go to the next slide, please, Logan. So there's a couple things that we really focus on that are important to us, and it can be referred to as kind of the difference. And what I think is unique for us is that we've been doing this for well over 50 years and coming up in 55 years. And as an institution, we're celebrating our 200th anniversary pretty soon here. So coming around the corner, what I'm saying here at a whole, though, is that with that legacy, we have gone through quite a few permutations, or quite a few iterations based upon the clinical needs of our patients, based upon equipment and technology, pharmacology that is updated over time. And with that, our curriculum is adopted each time. And so with that, importantly, we're able to draw back on our experiences of how things have been and kind of do a little projecting of where we think the field and the profession is going to be going and where healthcare as a whole is going to be going. And we really try to harness those to make sure our students are getting the most up-to-date application and equipment and knowledge so that they can apply it in the clinical setting. Our graduates are pretty sought after. I received the phone calls from a lot of employers, and it's not uncommon for me to say, I'm sorry, as far as I know, all of the students in our senior class have already been offered positions, but I'd love to introduce you to our first year students, and you can start conversations with them. And so we'll engage that, allowing for those conversations to take place sort of offsite a little bit. But they're heavily recruited, and a lot of that I think is because of the challenging curriculum we have with our clinical sites. Our clinical partners are fantastic, and our patient population is quite challenging. And that combination, what you end up with is exposure to very, very challenging cases. And that's exactly what you want, is you want challenging cases to really, stretch and spread your capabilities so that when you go into practice on your own and you're out there working a care team model and you're in the room, it's on you. And so you need to make sure and have those experiences to fall back on. During our time, our graduates recruiting 2,100 plus clinical direct patient hours. This is really important to us. We really focus on the clinical direct patient care. We do measure, of course, the total time people are in the hospital, but we also really have a core requirement for graduation that people are meeting that direct patient contact hour as well. Not only do we have all the general rotations here based in Washington, D.C., but we also have all the specialties. So most people who want to do all the rotations here in D.C., and there are a few, not a lot of them, but a few, they're able to do them all here. But we also, of course, offer specialty and some other general rotations all throughout the country. And we have over 100 affiliate rotation sites all through from California and Stanford, and all throughout Texas and New Mexico and Colorado, and all the way across to the East Coast. So very proud of our longstanding relationships with all those institutions. Next slide, please. So our outcomes overall, they're doing pretty good, right? Our students train incredibly rigorously, and with that, the passage rate and the job applications and placement rates is quite high. Very proud of all of our students. They put in the work, and they're the ones that take ownership over their education. With that does come some rewards that go with the position, and one of the rewards is the compensation overall. And so our students do get recruited quite well and receive quite generous compensation packages. In addition, it's very common in our field for people to do overtime without even thinking about it, right? So when the whistle blows, you don't get to just leave your patient on the operating room table, right? You have a responsibility to your patient. Society has an expectation, all of us, to follow through on that. And so a little bit of overtime here and there adds up pretty quickly, and that can easily be 2,400 on average for the last cohort that graduated. That last cohort that graduated also had an average sign-on bonus of about 40,000. That means there were many above that and a few with none, although that varies based upon what the environment is and the interests of the particular graduate, right? So they might want to be in a particular place that has plenty of employees, but it's important to them to be there for whatever reason. And so there might be a little bit less of a impetus to have a bonus there. We have a very rapid payoff rate for most of our graduates. They're doing 10 years or less, where the vast majority of them have paid off all of their debt. A significant percentage are on that 5-year mark. I was very surprised and impressed by that number of those who did it in about 5 years, give or take. As far as work-life balance, I can't express that enough, how vital that is. Time flies by incredibly fast. And so having a chance to have a work schedule that fits your interests and needs at different stages in your life. The classic example is the young person who just wants to work and they enjoy it, and it's they got a lot of emotional rewards from doing the practice and providing patient care. And so they'll happily do a little bit of overtime or work odd hours and so forth. But then you might get later on in life and you might have a family, and you might want to spend some time with your daughters and your son and your parents as they're getting older. And so adjusting your schedule such that you're able to work and still provide care, but also be around for those other life events that are quite important. Look, our job is taxing at times. We do see quite a variety of pretty challenging things that most people don't get to see. With that, though, it's important that we take time for ourselves and take time out. And with that, most employers have about 6 weeks of PTO. It's important people take this so they can recharge and come back and be their best selves to provide the care that the patients expect. Very good. So moving on a little bit to Washington, D.C., Daniel's going to come on here in just a little bit and share a little bit more, but I'll just kind of give the first line, and then Daniel can kind of take it from there. With the first component here is, we started in Ohio back in 1970. What that meant was we were working and developing the program back in 1968 and 69. And then with that, over time, our graduates were, working in different parts of the country, and some of the partners there said, we're hiring your folks. We would love to have more of them. What do we need to do? And so that started in Houston, the very first program outside of its own state. So we went through a tremendous amount of hoops and requirements and accreditation requirements to make that happen, and it worked out incredibly well. Very proud of that opportunity to partner there. And that happened in 2010. And then that work continued as our graduates there from Houston expanded up into the Austin area. And the same thing happened, working with our clinical partners. How can we work to make sure we can recruit more of your graduates? And so we opened up our Austin program in 2023. Very excited for that at our recent graduating class, and looking forward to them enjoying their practice. With that, I'll try to transition to Daniel here to take it from here and talk a bit more about Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Shane. We're going to dive in. Logan, is there a next slide with us? Yeah, perfect. Excellent. So now I've been living in Washington, D.C. area for now 15 years. I've described earlier in my introduction, I'm on staff at the MedStar Washington Hospital Center, which has been our primary site since the inception of our program here in D.C. And so I've got to know Washington, D.C. as now an adopted home. It goes without saying it's the nation's capital, we're all aware of, but most folks don't realize that it's a relatively young, vibrant community with the majority of the residents around the age of 20 to 40 years old. I think the census said around 40% of the makeup of the DC population is the 20 to 40 age range, so relatively young. It's a vibrant city that is, as Shane alluded to, a hub of both cultural, educational, and political activities. It attracts a lot of young professionals, students, and early career individuals in different internships, and really motivated individuals. And so I say that because our students really acclimate well to the city. There's always these hidden gems in the district that a lot of our students discover when they first start the program. We have a beautiful waterfront here. A lot of folks don't know that the Potomac River goes nearby. Lots of water activity there, as well as beautiful restaurants, shops on the riverfront. So that's kind of the scene in the DC area. But I like to spend a little time, which is on the slide here, talking about our first year primary rotation sites, and then talk a little bit more about our second year rotation sites are also in Washington, D.C. We have a very really robust medical center with MedStar Washington Hospital Center, as well as Children's National Hospital Center located in the same area. We also have George Washington University Hospital, MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. And both of those university hospitals serve as our first year clinical sites. And all these clinical sites offer, a variety of different type of cases. I would be amiss not to mention also we have Lafayette Surgical Center, which is where Cyril works. So we have a variety of subspecialties in which our students rotate through. We have different patient acuity populations. We have a variety of like I said, subspecialty cases that students experience to just really gain a lot of skills and knowledge components that really prepare them well for the transition to practice. So overall, I mean, the experience that at our clinical sites, as well as the lifestyle and living in Washington, D.C., I think is unmatched. It's like most metropolis areas, metropolitan areas, just really offers a lot for the young adult, the young professional who's motivated, and it really has drawn and been appeal for all of our students.
Awesome, thank you. Move on to Cyril.
Thank you, Logan. Let's start with the first year coursework. The first year will be didactic focused to build a strong foundation based on physiology, pharmacology, and anesthesia, as well as instrumentation and monitoring. The coursework will incorporate in-person instruction, as well as problem-based learning, class discussions, case discussions, as well as some Zoom lectures. Students will benefit from pharmacology, physiology, and EKG taken as a network across all CASE programs. All the other courses in DC will be taught in person for the majority of the time. The first year will be classroom focused, as I mentioned earlier, but it will be paired with simulation labs and exercises. From week 1, you will be in simulation lab. We call that summer immersion, where you're immersed into the specialty of anesthesia. You'll have intense, vigorous classroom semester in the summer, along with simulation. And within that first month, you will also begin your clinical experience. Clinical experience training as the semester goes on will increase gradually. In the summer, typically 2 to 3 days a week. In the fall, 3, and then by the spring semester, usually maybe 4 days a week you will spend in clinical experience. We can go to second year, the next slide. Thank you, Logan. Also, I would like to mention that during the first year, you will earn your basic life support and advanced cardiac life support certification. Second year coursework will be primarily focused on clinical experiences. However, you will still have didactic instruction as well as simulation lab. Didactics will include ethics and law class, as well as an emphasis on patient safety and board preparation. Your clinical experience will increase to about 3 to 5 days, depending on your monthly rotations. You might be on a rotation that is something like OB, where maybe you're working 3 12-hour shifts, or it might be at an ambulatory surgery center where you're working 5 8-hour days. At CASE, you will complete a rotation in ambulatory, cardiothoracic, OB, peds, neuro, and trauma. Every student will be mandated to complete rotations in each of those specialties, as well as will have opportunities based on their own wants and likes and interests if they want to take an elective monthly rotation. The electives could be something with regional, maybe GI, ICU, things of that nature. So let's go on to the second year rotation schedule. This is a sample of a typical second year student in DC. So you will see the clinical sites that Daniel reviewed earlier, as well as sample rotation month and rotation type. You will see again that all students are required to complete a monthly rotation, ambulatory, cardiothoracic, OB, peds, neuro, and trauma. I would like to point out within trauma, there's an opportunity at Case DC to have exposure to burns, as well as different schedules. You might be scheduled for the night shift on trauma, or even OB, the night shift. You might be scheduled for days. You might be scheduled flex, where you're coming in midday, like a 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. The great thing about these second year rotations is that you're getting this variety and this diverse experience, different settings, different environments, different hospitals, as well as different times, different schedules. And so throughout your second year with all this diversity, you're starting to pinpoint where do I see myself in a few years? What kind of employment, what kind of job would I like? You can also double up on certain rotations. For example, if you know that you want to be employed later on in pediatrics, in a pediatric setting, you could request having 2 pediatric rotations, which would increase your knowledge base for peds. The other great thing about the second year schedule is we have over 80 external clinical sites and partners that you may choose from, as well as if you do not see the state or the city that you want to be in on that list, you could be an ambassador for CASE and you could be the first student that rotates there. Our administrative staff is extremely helpful and supportive in helping students arrange their own external rotations. And then maybe the following year, that rotation in Arizona that we didn't have in 2027, we have in 2028. Thank you, Logan.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Nebby to share her student experience.
Hi again. Yes, so I went to the University of Kansas for undergrad. I studied behavioral neuroscience, and I had the intention of going to medical school at the time. And so I was taking all of the pre-med prerequisites. I had had a little bit of healthcare experience. And then around my senior year of undergrad, I started to have doubts and I started to question if medical school would be the right path for me. So I started to do more research and started to talk to other people about different professions in healthcare. And my friend told me about the AA profession, which I had never heard of before. So I was like, ooh, like, I don't know what that is. And luckily, I actually live where AAs can practice. So I was able to shadow an AA. And I really enjoyed the shadowing experience. I really enjoyed being in the OR and I saw how hands-on the profession was. And I don't know, I was really enthralled by it all. And then talking to the AA and then talking to other AAs that day at the hospital, it just really became apparent to me how much they all love their profession. And so I was like, okay, like I think I should try to pursue this career. So I decided to apply to CASE because it was a more well-established program and it puts students in clinicals really early, which I also really liked. And then I was drawn to the DC location in specific because of the culture and diversity. I also have family here, so I thought it'd be a cool experience to live in DC for a little bit. So when I applied, I already had a lot of the prereqs because I was pre-med. So that part was a little bit nice. And then the summer after I graduated, I spent that summer studying for the GRE, and then I submitted my application that like after the summer. And then I heard back a little bit after, and then I just recently started the program in June. So I've been in this program for about 4 months. It's been really cool. I would say my experience so far in this program is that it's definitely very challenging, but it is very rewarding. People describe it like you're drinking out of a fire hose, and I would definitely agree. There's just a lot of information being thrown at you. But it's just amazing how much like that I have learned and how far I've come. And it's only October, which I just think is insane. But I would describe a day in my life. So our weeks kind of vary just depending on our schedule. But on our clinical days, it depends. So like if we don't have any classes that day, that's just a whole full clinical day. So we get there around 6 o'clock in the morning and then we're dismissed later that evening. But then on days that we do have class, we're dismissed a little bit early so that we have time to get to class, which is nice. And then on non-clinical days, we might still have class. So we come to campus, or we might not have class, which is nice as well. So yeah, our schedule varies a lot. But overall, I really, really have enjoyed this program so far. I've never felt as challenged as I have now, but it's also amazing to me that like I see myself growing, I see myself learning, I see myself developing skills and I never thought I would have when I was first exposed to it. So it's a really cool experience.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Nebby. A couple questions that came through for the pre-submitted questions. Did your study habits change from undergrad to graduate to this program? And how did you adapt to that?
Absolutely. They definitely have changed. I would say that in undergrad, I had a little bit more downtime, but now we have exams like every week. So you really have to stay on top of it and really start studying early because especially like with clinicals and stuff, time just goes by so fast. I would be lying if I said I've mastered how to study. Like I'm still figuring it out, but I would definitely say time management, start studying early, try to review after class.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. All right, we'll take it over to Shane to talk about admissions requirements.
I want Nebby to keep talking. She's just awesome. We very much admire the work that Nebby does. She was very accomplished undergrad and came to us with some fantastic assets as it is. So Nebby, on her own right, is quite accomplished, and happy to have her with our curriculum. And I think her spotlight is so important because I think it just really speaks to what the curriculum and what the sort of history is able to kind of put together for our students when they come in. And it's great to hear, Nebby, that you're enjoying that and getting testing your limits a little bit in a good way. So moving on then to that, a little bit about the admissions requirements. So all of our applicants and acceptances have to have a bachelor's degree from an accredited college or university. That's, of course, a standard requirement. And of course, our prerequisite curriculum is very similar to most medical schools. There's quite a variety of requirements. Different medical schools have different focuses and missions. And so some of the requirements are focused on that mission. And ours is to make sure that we're graduating highly competent clinicians. And so with that, we want people to have a strong mastery of the sciences. And so we have a couple additional courses that some of the medicals don't have, which is the the physiology and anatomy. Those are prerequisites, as well as the calculus, of course, but not all medicals have that, but we do for sure, as well as advanced statistics. So those are a little bit different than most, but we have them and they do work, and it's an important reason for us to have them. The admissions test as well, the MCAT or the GRE, either one of them work. We tend to have maybe 50-50, varies some years, might be 60-40, back and forth, but that's an expectation. The reason for that, and this is important, is that there's a requirement to pass a national board exam, right? It's a sit down, fill in the bubble, answer choice. And so one needs to be able to demonstrate that capacity to pass a standardized exam. Because if people have a challenge with that, they will not be able to pass the board exam. So that's kind of the requirement for that. It also gives us some insight on how people have been able to prepare for challenging exams. So that's also very helpful. In addition to that, we have the CASPER, which is basically situational judgment. And there's no wrong answer. There's just your personal answer. We have that because it helps us understand a little bit of background for people's and their perspectives and choices they might take. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about some of the prerequisites already. As I said, most of these are the same for medical school. I highlighted the physiology and anatomy with the lab. That's really important with the lab. We want those to be in person. And in addition to that, the advanced statistic, which is at the very bottom. The rest of them are pretty straightforward for most people who are focused on healthcare professions. Next slide, please.
Yes, and I want to add, I did drop a link in there that goes over in depth each prereq that links back to our website.
Thank you. So applications are open. They opened up in March, and we are in our October 1st deadline for our early decisions. So we're wrapping up. We have a large influx of applications that came in through October 1st. And so we're reviewing all those applications. We'll continue doing our interviews all the way through till February. And then we'll have our final regular decision for applications by January 15th. So in addition to that, we'll have final admissions notifications and enrollment decisions. And then our class will begin in May. We usually have maybe 2 to 3 months before the classes begin, lots of interaction with the incoming students. We have some pre-reading that the class does as a whole, sort of as a shared experience. And then people often are looking for their roommates and apartments and so forth. And so we provide some resources to people 2 to 3 months before the curriculum starts. Next one, thank you. As far as the numbers concerned, I think it's important. You can see the bold number above there, 3.7, 3.7 on the prereqs, 504, and then on GRE above that 50 percentile, of course. But I also want to highlight, importantly, the lower and smaller font between there. So we take a point. This is very important to us to look at the entirety of the applicant, and the questions we ask and the materials we ask for help us round out and provide as much information as we can ask for to understand about the applicant. And then in addition to our application process, our interview process, we're able to understand even more about the applicant. And so we try to gain all that information and then look holistically at it. So we may have somebody that has a 3.3 and has an MCAT that's a 497, but they have demonstrated other aspects of their application that really stand out to us, right? And in the entire spectrum that you can imagine, one would want to have in a clinical practitioner, that's what we'll be looking at. So it is very possible for people to apply with lower, middle, and higher ranges, a blend. They might start off a little, challenge in freshman year, and that does happen sometimes, but then they get their legs. right, and they start making some progress, we look at that. People who might have struggled at first, but then turn it around. That's really important to us. In addition, people sometimes go back to school. They might have had their first degree and then they go back because they have a different passion, and that will change their GPA and variably with the new coursework when they're a little bit, more of an adult and really focus on what they're trying to achieve. So that's some of the data on our incoming class. And Logan, I wanted to highlight a couple more things if I could real quickly.
Sure, go ahead.
Very good. So a couple of things I didn't get a chance to share with you guys. Look, we're in Washington, D.C. It's incredibly important to us that we are speaking to our broad community here. We have an international community. And with that, we have the opportunity to be exposed and participate in the care of people from across the world. That's great. It's very rewarding. But it's also important to share that in many places in the world, there is still a substantial inequity on the availability of medical care and anesthesia care. So it is very important to us that our students and our graduates understand that and provide for themselves an opportunity to provide care to folks who do not have that access around the world. It's disheartening to see so many places in the world that do not have that access. And we find that it's a responsibility of ourselves and our students to provide that care where it is so desperately needed. So that's an important tenet for us. In addition, I want to highlight our varied schedule. As Nebby brought up, you really got to be on point and make sure you're managing your time well. But what helps with that varied schedule is that that is a clinical expectation. And so we want to make sure that our students, our trainees, are getting real life, real world experience. So when they go into clinical practice, right, they can fall back on their training. And that's the second time I've said that. And I want to highlight the reason for that. The fiction that people rise up to the occasion because of some, mythical powers that come to them, we can't rely on that, right? And so what we want is we want our students to be trained in a very challenging environment so that they can fall back on their training, which is really good, right? In those stressful moments. And it does get stressful. And so being able to file back in that routine comfortably is going to lead to better outcomes for their patients and also a healthier, better trainee and graduate and practitioner. So those are really important to us to make sure that we're providing that real world exposure. Lastly, I want to bring up the study approach that Nebby also brought up. It was a great question by an individual who brought that up. There is so many ways to study. There really are. We have found there are certain ways that do benefit our students, and we do make an intention to focus and share what some of those approaches are with our students while they're here. So there's quite a bit different ways to do it, but we do like to share and highlight what some of those are to help them succeed in this slightly faster pace than they had in undergrad. Logan, thanks for that extra time.
No problem. We actually do have one more slide if you want to hit on the student body profile for the first year class.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think it sort of reads to itself. Most of our students are in the pre-health, biological, life sciences. So that's where you find most people in the bio. Of course, there's a variety though. We have students who came from a nursing background, a public health background, bench work researchers, products, manufacturing, the business side. Of course, chemistry and biochemistry are also quite popular. But I do want to highlight that other is a pretty large number. It's double digits still. And so there's quite a few different varieties of people's background, whether they be history or geology, that come to us with those backgrounds, and they do quite well also. And what I like about them is that they speak to the broad nature of the human condition and the needs that patients have. And having those varied experiences really speak to patients because they come from every walk of life. And so having those varied experiences is something that can lend well to, making sure that patients have a good experience during their care. Thank you for that reminder, Logan.
Great, no problem. All right. Get us to the next slide. So we're going to open up for some Q&A. I have been answering some questions in the chat, but keep them coming. We have about 15 minutes. I am going to drop a link there. I received your pre-submitted questions. One of the common questions was asking about our tuition and fees. So we have a webpage dedicated to that information. So I'll drop it in the chat for you all there. I'm going to go ahead and go through the chat to ask some questions to our panelists. So the first one, Daniel, I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question if you feel comfortable sharing. We have students who are not traditional students. Can you talk a little bit about the transition from being a teacher to the profession? The AA.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. I'm happy to. I think this question is directed toward my personal path to the profession.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So considering that, as Shane alluded to, there's several of our applicants come from a variety of backgrounds, and I was no different. And so it should be prefaced that, yes, I was a classroom teacher prior to coming into this program, but also had a pre-med undergrad background. And so even though I had an eye on patient care, I felt drawn to the public health and public education arenas prior to pursuing a track toward patient care. And so the transition into a program such as this was, despite difficult, there's a lot of skills that we learn as, students and then as educators that can prepare us for this climate of rigorous curriculum and instruction and the demand that Nebi alluded to, which is the time and task management. So those skills are transferable into like enrolling into a program such as this. And so yeah, I would encourage, if you have a background as a educator or a teacher, that is clearly you're aware of the demands of the classroom instruction. And so for you to transition to this space, I think you could do so with relatively ease and some support.
Great, awesome. Thanks for answering that question. I'm going to turn this next question over to Nebi. There's a question, how much interaction do you have with the second year students? Is there a mentorship program with the DC campus?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, all of the students got hooked up with a second year student so that we were able to reach out to them if we had any questions and have some sort of mentorship. That was really nice, especially at the beginning of the year, because we were just new to the program and everything was just happening so fast. So it was nice they were able to ask a lot of our questions, especially when we were starting clinicals and we hadn't really gotten used to the hospital setting yet. I know a lot of the first year students do have big relationships with the second years, like they hang out outside of class. But for the most part, for me, like I see a lot of them in clinicals. And so that's when I'll talk to them during break and stuff. And it's really nice because they're really encouraging. Because again, it's really easy to get overwhelmed, and then talking to someone who's been through the process can make you feel encouraged again.
Awesome, thanks so much. I'm actually going to ask you another question, Nebi. A common question is, how do you find housing? Does Case Western provide it? Is it something you look for on your own? Can you walk us through what it looks like for incoming students?
Yeah, so there is no there's no campus living for Case at DC, so you have to find housing on your own. Last year during I forgot what event it was, but we had an event where we came to class before classes started and we were able to talk to the second years. And a lot of them told us the neighborhoods to look for, which was nice. And then we made a group chat before the program started, and I reached out to one of the students and to be a roommate. And so you can definitely figure out housing by yourself.
Awesome, thanks so much. This question will go with Shane. Can you just give a quick overview of the difference between license and delegatory?
Yeah, happily. So many years ago, many state legislatures realized that they were not going to be able to predict the future. And in order to prepare the opportunities of what might be down the road, they allowed physicians and other disciplines to have the ability to delegate duly trained and duly qualified individuals particular tasks. So in several states still, Ohio was one of those states many years ago, but Texas, for example, and Michigan and Pennsylvania, those are a couple examples of delegatory authority states. What that means is that the physician can delegate specific tasks, which means do the anesthesia care team model. And in those environments, that's how we practice. The guardrails are up between that is because of the group and the hospitals. So the hospital has credentialing and practice requirements. And so you have to apply for privileges to practice at those hospitals. And so a governing board reviews every practitioner, every AVP and every physician that goes there. And so that's one of the ways that the review process is delegated basically to the group level and to the hospital level. And so that's the nuance between the two versus getting a license from a state board that does the vetting for you.
Thank you. I will go ahead and give this question to Cyril. Can you just walk us through what an interview day looks like for students?
Yes, absolutely. We offer virtual and in-person interviews. They do offer the same exact experience. So it starts off the night before. Usually there is some sort of meet and greet with some senior students, and that will help begin the process of the interviewing. They are able to meet with seniors and ask questions and just get to know the seniors in a more relaxed, casual setting, or possibly over Zoom if it's a virtual meeting. And then the next day, interviewees will arrive on campus or via virtual mid-morning, and they will have an orientation and meet all the faculty and orientation with the program director. And we'll go over the plan for the day. They have an opportunity to visit in person or virtually in the simulation lab. That's usually one of the most exciting components of the interview day, actually being in the simulations lab. That is usually led by students. So students will go through some skills or exercises to demonstrate skills in the lab. It also offers an opportunity for the interviewees to ask questions to a different set of students. Then we'll have a break for lunch casually. And if it's virtual, they'll have some time to recompose themselves before going into the formal interview process. Usually in DC, it is 4 one-on-one interviews with faculty. Those interviews range from 20 to 30 minutes, and that usually takes the rest of the afternoon. So it will be a one-on-one interview process, usually.
Great, thank you so much. This question will be for Daniel. Can you give any tips on how to find some shadowing hours in your area at your local hospital?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. I think all of our clinical partners are trying to manage the influx and volume of observerships post-COVID. I think that's the reality we're facing across this local landscape. A lot of our institutions are still trying to determine whether or not to even extend the invitation for shadowers. And so right now we're currently supporting 2 of our clinical partners and trying to find more of our hospitals to open the door to other shadowers or shadowing opportunities. So with this increased volume, as you can imagine, the demand is much higher than the supply. And so we're trying to do our best to balance between creating safe spaces for our healthcare staff and having trainees at these sites, as well as observers, and as well as, again, other training programs have their own trainees here. So you're looking at, residents and, and medical students and, again, on our program. And so there's a balance with the number of individuals to bring into these facilities and to make sure that it still creates a safe space for patient care, putting our patients first. So in saying that, if you have interest in shadowing, you can reach out to our program, and we can try to navigate to where the next opportunity will come up to put you in the right place. So it's unfortunately right now, sometimes it's a wait and see and get in the queue to try to get these shadowing experiences, but don't be deterred. I would still check around your local areas, regional areas, and see if there's also shadowing opportunities. And we've had students, come from multiple areas in the States to fly to different locations or drive or commute to find shadowing opportunities. So, a lot of our prospective applicants have removed barriers by just casting a wide net to see if there's any shadowing opportunities at different locations because of the realities I just expressed, that there is just a large demand and low supply of available shadowing opportunities.
And I'll just add to Daniel's points here, and he had so many great options that I recognize that we have people from across the country. And so a great resource is going to be your National Society and Academy. So you can reach out to, for example, if you're from Nevada, the Nevada Society of Anesthesiologists. You could also reach out to the Nevada Academy of Anesthesiologist Assistants. So in whatever state you are in, there's definitely a Society for Anesthesiologists, and most likely a AAA as well. And so those two contacts would be great resources for you to connect with. In addition, just to highlight, we do have an observership here in Washington, D.C., and I think it's a fantastic way to start the conversation. I think it's a big ask to sort of say, hey, I want to go shadow somebody in the OR. I don't know much about it though. It's a different ask when you say, I would love to shadow in the OR. I've been to a program. I've seen the sim lab. I sat in a class. I've talked to some of the faculty. I've talked to some of the students. I know the environment. That's a very different ask then. And so I want to just highlight those two parts. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. This question will be for Shane. After graduating, do most students who graduate from the DC location stay in DC?
Yeah, great question. There's no answer that I can give you that's accurate because it changes every single year. Last year, we have maybe 60+% that stayed in Washington, D.C. I think the year before that was at about 50%. And then we have other years where it was about 15% that stayed in Washington, D.C. I can never predict how the wind is going to blow. And so I remember one year we had 5 graduates go to one institution all the way in the west side of the states. Never anticipated that. None of them were from that state. But something happened and the wind blew and they all decided to, go along with it. So it varies year by year. We do find that this is a desirable place to be. And so we do have a lot of students that do want to stay here. But as time goes by, their evolution and interest sometimes adapts as well. But we do definitely keep a large percentage here. And I did want to highlight too some of our other sites. We do have our clinical sites at MedStar Washington Hospital Center, George Washington University Hospital, Children's National, Lafayette, Georgetown. But we also have people practicing at Howard University Hospital, and we have people practicing and training at Johns Hopkins, Sibley. And so there's many other partners in the city beyond the hospitals we highlighted.
Great. Thank you so much. It looks like we have time for maybe just one more question, and I'm going to hand it over to Nebi. Any tips for somebody who is looking into this program and maybe wanting to submit their application that you can share from your experience?
I would say submit your application as early as possible. I think that gives you a better opportunity. Also, just try to make your application as competitive as possible. Try to get involved in undergrad and try to get your grades as good as you can.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right. That's all we have time for. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize, but you can always email us at msaprogram@case.edu. We'll be happy to answer it there. If you do have some questions, please check out our website first. The answer is probably on there. We try to keep our website the most up to date. And if you want to follow us on any of our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, the handle is the same for all 5 of those. All right, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening, and thanks for tuning in.